Everyone, we're now live. You may proceed with the meeting.
Thank you, Angelica. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the December 3rd meeting of the Mountain Community Capital Fund. Hope everyone had a great holiday and are getting back into the groove this week. For today, my name is Tim Love. I'm the vice chair for the MCCF. I'm stepping in for Jeff Kaplan, who is the chair. Jeff is out on paternity leave, so please send your well wishes to Jeff and his family as they welcome the new one into their lives. So with that said, we will go ahead and begin the roll call. I'm going to go through the list. If you would please raise your hand and indicate that you are present in the meeting, that would be great. Rachel Nygaard.
Here. Good morning, everyone.
Maui Vang.
Here. Hi there.
Carl Aguirre.
Here.
Nikki Reed.
Good morning.
Yasleen Gonzalez.
Good morning.
Karen Omansky. Dee Williams. Reggie Jones. Rosanna Mulcahy. We know that Jeff Kaplan isn't here. Tara Brown. Jesse Maxwell.
Here. Good morning.
And Frank McGowan is running a few minutes behind, but will be joining us shortly.
He will also be joining us soon.
Who was that, Angelica?
I believe Dee will also be joining us soon.
Great. And Frank, your ears must be burning. We were just talking about you.
I'm here.
Excellent. So Frank is present. Based on my count, I believe that's quorum for this meeting. So I think we're good to proceed with the meeting as the agenda indicates. So our first item on today's agenda relates to the approval of the minutes from the November meeting. Those were sent out in advance of this meeting. Hopefully you've all had a chance to review. Question to the group. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes for the November meeting?
I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. At this point, we'll go to the vote. We'll go as a roll call style for this vote. Down the list, Rachel Nygaard.
Approve.
Maui Vang.
Approve.
Carl Aguirre.
Approve.
Nikki Reed.
Approve.
Frank McGowan.
Approve.
I'm Tim Love. I also approve. I believe that covers our voting members for that particular vote. Moving through the agenda, we'll step into old business. Our only item of old business today, unless y'all are aware of others, would be an update on grants as it relates to the Mountain Community Capital Fund. I have one brief update to share, but would ask Rachel Nygaard to chime in as well. The Buncombe County Commissioners, through their American Rescue Plan, Local Fiscal Recovery Fund allocations, have awarded a sum to the Mountain Community Capital Fund, and specifically to Self-Help, who's the fiduciary of this fund. So that's really exciting news, because at our last meeting, I think everyone recalls that we had officially run out of money. And so this comes at a great time to kind of keep the momentum moving forward. And so really excited about that. Rachel, is there anything you'd like to share from your perspective on these funds?
Sure, happy to jump in. This is Rachel. As you might know, the American Rescue Plan Act funds are administered through the Strategic Partnership Office at Buncombe County. So our team is working to implement the all of the different steps necessary to get the funding into the Mountain Community Capital Fund so it can be used for more loan guarantees. One of the important next steps is an economic development hearing. So even though the board has already approved the grant as part of their overall portfolio of recovery fund investments, because we're a county government in North Carolina, we follow certain steps for appropriations that are economic development related. So there's a public notice and a public hearing that's part of their Board of Commissioners upcoming meeting, which is next Tuesday the 7th at 5 p.m. We anticipate that it will pass unanimously unless they learn any new information that would change course because it's already had one vote. After that necessary vote related to economic development, then we move into contracting. And so our staff will be reaching out to Self-Help Ventures Fund to get the written agreement in place. These are federal dollars instead of local dollars, so it will look a little bit different than the first time Buncombe County put funds into the project, but similar, and hopefully we can keep that moving at a fairly good speed, and we will keep the team posted in terms of how soon the lenders can begin using that guarantee.
That's great. Thank you, Rachel. Any questions for Rachel or I related to the county grant process?
Yeah, so how long do you estimate that the process would take and we would have the funds available?
I'll defer to Rachel. The public hearing, we'll know immediately on Tuesday the status of that. But in terms of other documentation, Rachel.
It's hard to estimate, I would say, near the start of the year, but really until we get our contracting teams together to gather and execute all of the necessary documents, it's hard to estimate.
I will just go ahead and chime in and say our legal team is out the last 2 weeks of the year on a much deserved break. So just throwing that in there is from a timeline perspective.
That's not a problem. We're processing a large volume of agreements on our end too. So we will again, just both organizations will work to take prompt action on our next steps and keep it moving along quickly. So even though we can't give an estimate, we'll keep you posted when we can.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? Awesome. Nikki or Frank, I wondered if we could inquire about next steps for the city's process. As you know, there was also an MCCF submission in the city's RFP process.
I'll defer to Frank if he has any insight there. I'm not the project manager, but yeah, go ahead, Frank.
I have a little bit of information. I have some information, but Dee has her hand up, which I'm assuming relates to the previous item. You're muted, Dee.
Thank you. I just wanted to say good morning, and I do apologize for my lateness. I am on the road between stops here in Ashland, and I'm headed out, so I may have to leave the meeting early, but I am in attendance. So thank you much.
Thank you, Dee. Glad to have you.
So in regard to the City of Asheville's ARPA application process, we put an RFP out. The city received 78 submissions. Of those, and don't quote me on any of these numbers because I'm not the project manager, but I've been working closely with folks. And that 78 submissions includes both internal and external projects. Of those, I believe 70-ish were proposals that we could in fact fund and met the terms of the RFP. There is a evaluation panel that is cross-functional and it's internal staff only, that is being led by Kim Marmon Sachs. And each of these evaluations are being reviewed by multiple staff. There's an evaluation matrix that takes equity into account in various ways. There's a scoring mechanism, and I believe the timeline for having that evaluation done is by the end of December. There is a council meeting in early January, and recommendations, I believe the plan is recommendations are going to council in, I'm not, actually I can tell you which date. Give me one second. I believe that's going to council on January 11th for initial recommendations and consideration by council. So somewhere around that time, we may get some direction from council as to what they are interested in funding, and to what extent. So that's my knowledge and understanding. Rachel, do you have a question?
What was the amount of funds requested for Mountain Community Capital Fund through the city's Arpa program?
I don't have that number. Nikki may know.
I don't. I think our partners submitted that application.
Yep. And I remember Matt Raker mentioning it. I don't want to speak because I don't know for sure. Yasleen, do you know by chance?
I don't remember the exact amount, or the number, but I can check with him.
No problem. Thank you.
Cool. So Frank, sounds like process is underway, and we can expect some notifications across the board in the January timeframe. Awesome. Fingers crossed. But good deal. Any questions for Frank or Nikki related to the city process? All right. Go ahead, Dee.
Just wanted to ask a question about the timeline. I thought December 15 was a timeline that was supposed to be met as far as notification. That has been extended, I gather. And will that be put into the city purchasing site to let folks know that is the January date is the date of notification? Do you know? Anybody know?
I don't know off the top of my head, Ms. Williams. I believe I'm unclear on whether there are initial, if there's any initial information going to council on the 14th or not. That has moved around a bit, so I don't know that anything has officially changed. But to be honest, I'm sorry, I'm just not the project manager, so I don't know if that's the case. I do think that if dates shift in terms of award, they will probably publicize that through our public input site. That's usually how they would handle that, because we've moved out of the phase of the RFP. So now we've received the RFP. If the timeline is going to shift in terms of date of award, they'll probably put it out through public input.
Frank, this is Rachel. I've just put a link to that public input page.
Thank you, Rachel.
Chat.
It's good to know our county partners are staying on top of what we do.
Rachel just continues to exceed all our expectations and just deliver nonstop on Mountain Community Capital Fund and other initiatives. And just want to take this opportunity to make it really awesome. Rachel.
Thanks. You're an excellent stand-in for our chair, Jeff Kaplan, today.
Yeah. Cool. All right, y'all.
Ms. Williams, did you still have your hand up for a different question? Okay, there you go.
I do apologize. No, thank you. That's sufficient. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank y'all. Well, at this point, we'll move into new business. There's 2 items here. One is a request to see if there's any loan presentations today. We've got 2 CDFIs on the call, Mountain Biz Works and Self-Help. One item I guess we should note up front, since funds have not actually been allocated to the fund, I don't know that we actually have guarantee dollars to approve. But would be great to hear if there's loans in the pipeline for discussion, and maybe we can move that to a future meeting if that's agreeable. Yasleen, you look like you're ready to say something.
Yes. Yeah, so we do have some deals in the pipeline, which is why I asked about the timeline, because we've got to work with those clients to on a closing time and just timeline expectations. So we do have a few deals in the pipeline. However, I don't have them ready to present today.
Understood. Well, our next meeting, I believe, is January. Looking for the date. And so hopefully
January 7th.
January 7th. Got it. So I think hopefully, self-help, we can bring the contractual documents to closure pretty quickly, so that, because January 7th is right around the corner. So I'm assuming we don't get it going in the next couple of weeks, then we may be looking, Yasleen, for your point of view, at a February timeline,
right,
for approval. So
January 7th feels assertive, but we'll try for it and see what we can make happen.
Yep. And we don't have to resolve this today, but we could also, if valuable, move our January 7th meeting back. We would just have to advertise it accordingly, but that would maybe give us a little bit more time to pull this together and maybe not have to wait until February. But that meeting the February meeting is the 4th. So I don't know that we gain that much time, but just throwing that out there, we can revisit that. So, Carl, your hand is raised.
Yeah, just a question for my own education, and this is for Yasleen. With Mountain BizWorks, do you make these loan recommendations contingent on MCCF participating, or is this just a way to sort of mitigate some risk? Like, how do you guys view that, bringing a deal forward?
It can be situational. A lot of the times, yes, we will not approve a loan if we do not have the MCCF guarantee. However, a lot of the times we do, if there is a lack of collateral and they don't qualify for any other program, and we're not able to go the SBA route or the 7A route, then we will use this as a backing for that specific loan.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is Rachel. I've got a follow-up question on the timeline. Yasleen, you mentioned there are some deals in the pipeline. Are they at the threshold level that would require MCCF operating committee approval, or at the under, so that BizWorks could approve?
I think we have, I believe we have 2 under and 2 over. So we would have to wait for those 2 over. I mean, I guess the question would be if we, because of the circumstance and, trying to wait on this, if the applicants were to need the funding fairly quickly, could we backtrack the guarantee on specific loan? I'm not backtrack, I'm sorry. Could we apply the guarantee on those loans retroactively once the funding funds come?
That feels messy to me, but ultimately it's the committee decision.
This is Rachel. I was going to say I'd have to look at the written documents to see if it's covered. I don't remember seeing that.
Go ahead, Melly.
I was also thinking too, for what it's worth, that could create bias in our decision-making process for those loans, given that we know they've had to get rush funding, so would put us at a probably feel more compelled to approve that compared to normal circumstances.
I think that's fair feedback. Dee, what's your feedback?
Thank you. I would agree, just simply because it doesn't seem procedural as far as what I'm read from the documents. And also, if you would, internally, if you had a process to do a bridge or whatever, you could do it. But unless it violates your underwriting guidelines, which it probably does, I wouldn't want to do it either as far as this loan pool fund is concerned. Also, I had another follow-up question about the refinancing portion of it. In the documents which exist now, refinancing packages, I believe there are 2 of them. If there are 2 or more, that triggers a stop clause. So I guess when talking about these loans, such as are these 2 loans, any of these loans on your books already, and you're just refinancing them and transferring them to Mount MCCF? They're
No.
not? Okay, so we've had some more that were refinanced that were part of your books, though, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right, good enough. Thank you.
Jesse?
This is Tim. This may be dipping into the next portion, but to make that bridge, great. One thing is that we don't yet have an assigned, that I'm aware of, a credit underwriting committee, which would be a subcommittee of the operating committee. And it's the responsibility of the credit underwriting committee to thumbs up the loans over $70,000. So there could potentially be an option if we have funding in hand prior to after the January meeting, but before the February meeting, that the credit underwriting committee could meet on that, throwing that out as a potential midway option. And then we would have the report out at the February meeting.
Thanks, Jesse. That's a good suggestion. Let's revisit that in just a second. But Yasleen, to your general comment, I think the committee is leaning towards let's just wait, keep it clean, which I think makes sense. That said, I think Dee is kind of right. Any lender can lend at risk. Like you lend under your own procedures, and so you can certainly proceed. But at risk of not being supported. So. But that's not the spirit of this, but I think from our perspective, it sounds like we wait.
No, that's fine. We are already tracking and accommodating to make sure that we can, the clients are aware the expectations at this point. But, of course, a lot of them are eager to go ahead and get the funding so they can get to work. And so just a suggestion, but thank you.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I think, and that's the really cool thing about this, that there is a pipeline. So don't want that to get lost in our bureaucracy. But
and really, really quick, I did get the amount that was requested from through the city of Asheville for MCCF. It was $1 million.
Very good. So Frank, we expect $2 million. Sorry. Local government humor. So I think for loan presentations, thank you, Yasleen. Jesse, representing self-help, anything, or you're good? Cool. So that concludes our new business item for loan presentations. We'll now proceed to our next item, which is a discussion on review of committee procedures. And we've got this fairly open-ended, but Jesse, I think you wanted to lead this conversation, and you've already kind of tiptoed into it with the credit underwriting committee. So please feel free.
Tiptoed into it. That's generous. Like, come on, guys, let's review the procedures. And in an effort, so I tested this out with Angelica earlier. Let's hope that I can do it. Share my screen. So bear with me for just a second because this is my second time doing this on Google. Let me see. On this, on this, on this. Okay. Wait for it. Can everybody see the super plain title slide? Excellent. Okay. So I will do my best to see if there are questions and stuff, but if I miss it, just holler. So this is going to try and make it as interesting as possible. But there are a lot of documents in the background that were established and signed off on way at the very beginning of this fund. And I know that we have some new folks that have come on, and also we're humans and forget things. I learned some things when I was reviewing them too, so wanted to share just so that we have a fresh start, and can also develop a list of things that we might want to address in the services and duties agreements or amendments that we might want to make moving forward. Given that this fund has been, we're gaining a little bit of traction. We've got some new dollars coming in. We're starting to really settle into what we want the fund to be. So queuing up just to establish our baseline so that we can work together to move forward. So I did send out an email on the 15th with all of the documents. And I'm going to say, hopefully you had a chance to read them. But if you didn't, that is A-okay, because we are all very busy. I'm going to give some top line points that really impact what we're doing right now. But I would recommend that at some point you do go back through and just read through all of the documents, just so that you have that for knowledge points. I also want to apologize in advance because there's some color changes on this PowerPoint because I'm going from one computer to another. So we're just going to make it festive today. The operating committee responsibilities, like here is the outline for that. So, and the first thing, due to my tiptoeing, would be to form and appoint members to the credit underwriting subcommittee. And this is a subcommittee, so it's not everybody on, I think it's 5 members of the operating committee whose responsibility it is to review loans over a certain dollar amount, and also to review any potential problematic loans or loans that have otherwise been articulated that need some sort of review for the first 6 months to a year after enrollment. And we'll go over that. This committee is the one that would be responsible if we ever hit any trigger point to issue a moratorium, and then to decide action here on out. So again, reviewing closed loans, monitoring volume and delinquencies and defaults, which is easy because we'll have a quarterly report that makes that more digestible. Trigger points, review and modify loan underwriting criteria as required, and we'll spend a little bit of time looking at the underwriting criteria that was initially agreed on. Raising capital to augment the fund, though that does so far seem like quite a team effort. And then decide if and when it's time for the fund to sunset. And this can be found in the services and duties agreement. The credit underwriting committee, yes, okay, so it is 5 members. And then they have, representative members, someone from the city, someone from the county, not a participating lender. That would be a conflict of interest. Loans, we've agreed that loans over 70,000 would need approval by the credit underwriting committee. Loans 50 to 70 would be open to a review period over 12 months, which is really just monitoring what that looks like. And then this is the important part. Hopefully, in theory, we'll never come to this, but realistically, we will. At some point, if one of the lenders says, we've done everything in our power to try, this loan is defaulted, we've tried everything to recoup the funds, we've worked with the borrower, we just need to charge this off and apply for the guarantee, they would submit that guarantee request to the credit underwriting committee, who would then confirm the amount, confirm the guarantee, and give the A+, where this committee would then let self-help know, and then we would issue reimburse whichever lender it is. Any questions on this so far? Rachel? Andy?
This is Rachel. I'm struggling to remember why it was that we held off on formation of the credit underwriting subcommittee, but I seem to recall that there was a numbers issue. There are not very many voting members in the entire committee itself, and so having a 5-member subcommittee of somewhere like around maybe 8 total voting members felt awkward. And so as I listened to this presentation on this section, I'm listening for whether you're recommending that we put steps in place to form this committee and comply with our services and duties agreement, or that we flag this as a potential restructure.
I think there are pros and cons to both options, and it's going to be a matter of, what as a group y'all think would be the best course of action. But thanks for, I appreciate you bringing up those action items. Dee?
Yes, hi. Thank you. This is Dee. I do remember that, as you say, that there weren't that many voting members anyway, and that we sort of all formed a credit underwriting committee depending on the threshold of the loan. It's fine with me. I mean, just like anything else any other group does as far as consensus is concerned. If you want to pick or select who you want, that is fine. Some of us are much more conservative than others. And so I would just say that I guess that is my purview. And because we don't have a lot of data right now on how these loans are performing, simply for the fact that a lot of them have been delayed. Or not really delayed, but no principal and interest payments were due for a period of 6 months. So I guess I'm the type of person that wants to know data in terms of how something is performing. And then I want a consistent approach in reporting that data. Quarterly is fine. It's fine. It's just that we haven't had a lot of consistency and a lot of data reported that we can chart the performance of the loans. It seems that they're going pretty well right now, but that would be just my input. Whatever the committee would decide, I don't particularly care to serve in any capacity that I'm not particularly deemed necessary for. But I would just interject that was the initial reason, is because there were so few of us. And I guess folks didn't want to exclude folks. So that was just my input. Thanks.
Any other thoughts, additions, context? Cool. Wait for it. I think, there we go. So again, with the underwriting committee or the whole committee, just reiterating our trigger points. A trigger point is a point at which basically we have to call a halt on lending until we figure something out. One would be the origination volume. So in the services and duties agreements, we basically have a 1-to-1. So once we secure additional funding in the pool, then we can do additional lending. The other one is delinquency. We can't exceed 20%. And then the other one is the average annual credit loss defaults cannot exceed 5%. So these are 3 trigger points that we will be monitoring and in I think it's the next slide or the slide after, I'll show where that shows up on the reporting document that we're working to confirm for those quarterly reports. Yes, Dee. You're still on mute.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Please excuse me. This is Dee again. We also had a trigger point of refinancing. Has that been deleted, or is that something you don't want in the agreement?
Yeah. So I remember you mentioned this in the last meeting.
Right.
So I have not found any evidence of that in any of the documents.
I looked at the operating documents that I got and I saw it. So it's been a while. I'll probably need to revisit, but we discussed this. You'll find that in some of the minutes that we had where we were concerned about the refinancing issue. It may be in the weeds somewhere, but we saw it and we did discuss it. So I'll have to review back again. It's been a while, but that was one of the triggering things with refinancing, particularly from the lender from their portfolio over to ours.
Yeah. So I remember you mentioning that, and I haven't found any evidence of it. And I know you're on the road, so not asking this immediately, but understanding that I just might have read these documents too many times and so miss it, because that happens.
No.
If you could find that spot, that would be really helpful, because if it is something that we're missing, then we definitely need to bring that
I could
in.
be wrong, but I do remember us discussing it coming up as a trigger point. So, I mean, it's been a while, but I'll try to revisit, pull it up and send it. I only have hard copies of the doc. I don't have an electronic file on it. I think it was given out as a hard copy and put into a manual for us. So that's where I'm coming from. And I'll pull it up as soon as I get back to my place.
Great. I can also resend the electronic versions.
No, that's fine too. But I'll look in my, my little book. Thanks.
Sure. Mallie?
Thank you. So I was just wondering for the language there in section 11.02, if there's more detail around that, for the sake of time, you're not pulling into this, because I was wondering if these terms are defined more. So for example, in delinquency, what exactly does that mean? From the lending perspective, and I'm not a lender. Is it 30 days delinquent? Is it 60 days? Average annual credit loss, just kind of like very defined ways on what these mean, because it'll be hard to track if people have different definitions.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's some detail that we can add in. So this is the trigger point. This is the section in the services and duties agreement. In the operating committee procedures, it goes into a little bit more detail, which is where we can pull out it cannot exceed 20%. It cannot exceed 5%. That's where that detail is. In terms of defining delinquency, it's if they missed a payment, then it's delinquent. And when they make that up, then it's no longer delinquent. But I have not seen anywhere where that is outlined. And I think that I appreciate that point, that it would be helpful for committee members, and if anybody in the public is listening in, to have those more clearly articulated. So I think that's something that we can add in. I don't actually think any of that needs an amendment. That's just detail to be added. And then the credit loss is defaults. That's when the loan, like we say, the loan is bad, we need to apply for the guarantee. So that credit, or like that loan, we've lost those dollars or that loan. But yes, we can add that in. Yasleen, you may have it somewhere, Yasleen.
Yeah, so usually a delinquency, a loan is delinquent after 30 days because we do credit report after 30 days. So usually that's when it's declared delinquent loan.
And is there like a grace period?
Yeah, so technically I guess it would be 29 days before. So we, if they were not able to make their payment, or for some reason missed their payment, we do have, we'll work with them, but we do let them know if they do not make up the payment within 30 days, it will be reported on their credit report. So we can either split the payments up in the payment in two payments within that 30 days, or have them make payments, so essentially they're not late, or do an interest only period if they need it. So we have multiple different ways that we can work with the client to avoid that.
Yeah, delinquency is, and Yasleen, you can correct me if you guys view it differently. For us, it's more of a warning, like, hey, this loan needs attention, and less of a, well, this loan is done. It's not that hard and fast. So
yes.
All right. Any other thoughts before we move to the next one? Great. Come on, computer. There we go. Confidentiality. This is from the services and duties agreement in terms of, because I know that we had talks around what's confidential and what's not confidential, and the people who wrote these documents were thinking about it. So information about borrowers and applicants' business plans, financial conditions is confidential to the lender. Information about participating lenders, so like Mountain BizWorks, Self-Help, Carolina Small Business, business goals, work plans, strategies, initiatives is confidential. Anything that a participating lender marks as confidential, or obviously this is like the technical stuff, media used to store, transmit, record, embody, or otherwise memorial such confidential information is also confidential. I did want to pull out and flag what is not confidential is any info that the city and or county is legally required to disclose pursuant to laws, rules, and regulations pertaining to public information. So that's also a piece there. And wanted to, thinking back to some of our past conversations in the last month or two, if anybody had any questions about confidentiality and what that might look like. Yeah, Maui.
Sorry, this is just me.
Don't apologize.
So does this mean confidential to the lender, which means we're not privy to this information as the committee, right? Or is this confidential to the general public? Like, I mean, I know that this is a public forum essentially, but what does this exactly mean? Who's it being confidential to?
That's a great question. I know for sure this is confidential to the public. And I think you're right that we need to look into more details around what is confidential to the lender versus what is confidential to the credit underwriting committee. Rachel, do you have a sense of that?
This is ringing a deja vu bell for me around the credit underwriting committee. Could confidential information be shared in that setting if it was not a majority? It wouldn't be a public meeting, and I don't want to try to say where that conversation landed without going back and checking records. But any information that's held in the general operating committee materials, I think by nature is public because we make our meetings available to the public. So that's just additional information to consider.
Yeah, Dee, and then I have a comment that may help frame.
Okay, thank you. This is Dee. I was just, I guess, along the line that Rachel was talking about, because if we aren't privy to certain information, we really can't do our job. I know that we are not probably considered on the level that a bank's internal credit, so-called credit committee would be, and thus privy to certain information. But certainly by these being public funds, that is our purview. And so if we can come up with mechanisms so that these individual identities, i.e. Consulting an attorney like a city or county attorney as we have before, if that is concealed and we can do our jobs and protect the public interest in these funds that we've been designated to look out for and protect, I think that is the whole issue. We might as well not even exist and just have the lenders making these according to whatever criterion that they're setting up. And that would be my only comment, is that we would probably be just unnecessary. There's always a way to do it, but I guess it determines the will of what we want to really do. Thanks.
Maui, and then I can share some context.
We're camping out, aren't we? Yeah. So one metric in particular that, whether it's shared in the public forum or it's just in the underwriting committee, that I would find very helpful, and I think last time there was some fuzziness around it for me, is the credit score. And the reason being is, I think the reason this committee exists is to essentially help those who don't typically qualify for these loans outright. And so I would be interested to see, hey, maybe we are, accommodating a certain tranche of credit scores. I'm using all the wrong words, but the performance of these loans are actually this, and kind of seeing those test cases kind of play out. And without knowing credit scores, we don't really know where impact is being made. It's like, maybe these are all lower threshold, lower credit rating individuals or business owners. I just think that is a pretty important metric that I would like to know. And if we're not privy to that, I would be open to learning more about why not.
Sure. So I want to flag that piece and go back to confidentiality, credit underwriting committee doing their job. So just for food for thought, for the Charlotte Community Capital Fund, which had both private dollars and public dollars in the pool, how we did with the confidentiality piece, there was a credit underwriting committee that reviewed any loans that needed to be reviewed not on a public forum. And they were privy to some of the more of the underwriting details. And then the decisions that they made were shared generally with the rest of the operating committee, but none of the underwriting details were shared with the rest of the operating committee. So that's how that balanced out, just as a context. On the credit scores, Maui, do you mind can we table that conversation until the end of this? Because I have some personal thoughts on this, and also an approach that self-help makes that might be helpful in our general thinking about what to monitor. And I also think that some things may be clarified in the next couple of slides when we talk about underwriting. Rachel.
I am comfortable with tabling it. My comment is that financial condition is vague, and that would be a place that we could clarify in A.
Financial condition. Okay. I think, Tim.
I just wanted to call attention to the time and ask that we reserve, 5 minutes or so for public comment for anyone that's here. I believe our end time is 10:30, so just wanted to throw that out there.
Great, thank you. I needed that.
This is great. I think we should continue it. I just wanted to be cognizant of that. So.
Yeah, and actually what might be helpful is maybe able to hit pause on a couple of these points, and we can pick up in the next meeting, and that will give other people time to go ahead and read the documents all the way through, so that we can come together and have a better sense of, okay, these are the areas that we want to have amendments. These are the areas that we want to be able to clarify a little bit more. These are the areas that make sense, and we can operate accordingly. So let's use this time limit to our advantage. I promise I won't talk a whole lot longer. So the underwriting guidelines, so there's a list of, there are underwriting guidelines that each lender agreed to, saying, we're going to look at it, use the fund in this way based on, XYZ reasons. And the general idea is that this is a but-for fund, but for being able to use this fund to mitigate some risk that we are not comfortable taking on our own, we would not do this loan, is the general underwriting piece. But that is conditioned on the fact that there's that one but for, right? That otherwise we would be able to do this loan, except for one piece that's missing or something that's not quite there. It's understood that the lenders are going to be underwriting the loan basically the way that they would normally underwrite the loan. And I know that varies a little bit. this is also an option where we can have some further conversation that the operating committee will review these parameters on as the fund grows, because sometimes these parameters may need to change based on economic condition or comfort level or what have you.
Real quick, Jesse, I think that slide for us hasn't gone to the next one.
Oh, here, let me get out of this really quickly. Yeah, I want to take, I stopped sharing. Okay, let me start sharing it really quickly. I want to take this moment. I want to not go through all of the underwriting at this time, because there are a couple other points that I'd like to make to sort of tee us up for a deeper conversation. But these are the underwriting guidelines. It identifies what counts as a startup. It identifies like what we need to be looking for. Those pieces. I'm also more than happy to, for those on the committee that are newer to the lending, or if there's any lingo that doesn't make sense, I'm happy to clarify that too, online or offline. And then where is it? I want to go back to, you guys can't see anything, can you? One more time, I promise, and then we'll stop. There we go. Okay, so this is D, I got you. Was second iteration of our quarterly operating committee report, where, and I want to bring up the two additions based on some feedback that we had. One was tracking startup loans, because there is a piece in the underwriting that says that we would limit the number of startup loans. Just on the nuts and bolts side, need to figure out how to account for those loans when they're no longer startup and take them out of those numbers. That's a back-end Excel thing, not a big deal. And then the other one added would be jobs created. And we need to confirm that definition, because I know that we do have ARPA money, or will potentially have ARPA money and some grant dollars. So funding from different sources that may have different reporting requirements around jobs. So I just went ahead and dumped in there. It's the number of new FTEs as pledged by the borrower prior to loan closing. But we may need to massage that a little bit and get a different definition of jobs based on the sources. And I'm going to defer to city and county on that. But I also want to, real quick, Rachel, before, say that it is not required for a loan to create or maintain jobs in order to qualify for this program. And I think that's important to highlight, especially if we look at sole proprietors or those much smaller businesses where you're not going to see like that, I'm going to add 7 jobs, but the value in supporting that business is still there. Yeah, Rachel.
Yep, just want to add the word retained. I know that Tim and Nikki, those that are working in economic development can give you more technical definitions, but we want jobs created and jobs retained.
And jobs retained. Got it. Can add those. Any other thoughts on this piece? And then I know that I have 2 minutes before we open to public comments, so I want to some food for thought around the credit score. And I think this is worthy of a deeper conversation too. So it would be, I think that we would need to think very deeply about what information we are trying to derive using credit score or looking at credit score, knowing that credit score is deeply problematic when it comes to sort of continuing systemic racism in lending and in access to capital. And so I have some articles that I can share that go deep into that research around wealth gaps and how Black and Brown individuals have lower credit scores for a variety of reasons that are beyond their control. And so I would pose to the operating committee that if credit score feels like an important metric, because that's not a metric that self-help personally, that as our institution shares. And it's also a metric that we use very differently than a traditional bank, and look at very differently than a traditional bank. In fact, rarely do we ever just look at the number, because there are issues with credit score in equity purposes. So thinking about the purpose of this fund, and how one of the efforts of this fund is to really help make sure that we are providing access to capital to Black and Brown entrepreneurs. I would just like to pose that we have a really critical and self-reflective conversation around why we want to look at credit score. And then I know that's not something that we can get into today necessarily, but I just want to pose that as some deep thinking, to tee up a future conversation.
Real quick comment, if you don't mind. I know we have to go.
Sure.
I would love to have this conversation more. I just don't think we can fully do it justice in our normal monthly meetings, because we have a lot of agenda items. So I would love for some of us, whoever's interested, to get together and have this conversation more outside of our monthly meeting, because I do think it's a very important one to have.
I think so. I'm going to defer to Tim on what we can and can't do outside of a meeting, because I don't know those parameters, but I'm happy to participate in whatever capacity.
That's great. I love the suggestion. And so I think we'll continue the broad discussion at our next meeting, Jesse, and thank you so much for the leadership on this. I think it's really helpful. To Maui's question, I see no reason why there can't be a small group that meets. I think we do need to be cognizant of quorum, which I think we should confirm, but a one-on-one with Jesse, Maui would not be out of bounds by any means, but if there was someone else that wanted to sit in as a voting member, we would just need to make sure that we did not exceed, I think, 3. So Carl's raising a hand like that.
Yeah, I had talked previously about sort of getting a clearer understanding of all that, so that would be helpful.
That's great. Well, and at the risk of cutting folks out, but wanting to be procedural, why don't we cap it at 2? And Maui, Carl, Jesse, y'all connect. And then if there's others that have an interest in learning more, we can schedule, additional conversations and report out at our next meeting in January. Does that work? But Jesse, I really appreciate you bringing equity into the conversation. And that's the whole point. That's why we're here. So I think it's really important. So thank you for that. With that said, I'm going to conclude our new business discussion and ask Angelica, are there any members of the public that have joined us today? And if so, would they like to comment?
We do not have any callers or comments to address at this time.
Thank you, Angelica. So with that said, I think we'll adjourn with about 2 minutes left. Our next meeting is in January 7th, as indicated earlier, which means I won't get to see many of you until after the holidays, but I hope you all have a great holiday season. Hope you stay safe, get to spend time with those that you love, and we'll see y'all next year.
Good work, Tim. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.